Hi, I'm George Howard for Artists House Music. This is Music Business 101, Chapter 8. I began discussing the ideas of goals way back in Lesson 1. In that lesson, I encouraged you to make sure that your long-term goals had value alignment. While this is fundamentally the most important strategic decision you have to address, it's only the start. This week, we'll get into more specific strategy. This is often areas where many artists break down. What happens is that instead of having a strategy with concrete and measurable objectives, most artists go day to day and engage in random acts of improvement. Random acts of improvement result in no real forward progress being made. Instead, the artist's career ping-pongs back and forth between moments of enthusiasm and moments of frustration. Eventually, the moments of enthusiasm become less frequent, and not long after, entropy sets in. Fighting entropy is a key job for all artists. Entropy is the natural condition that all things tend towards unless externalities step in. In an artist's career, the externality to fight this natural tendency is strategy. Strategy is the artist's tool shed. Inside the shed are all the individual tools he will use to implement strategy. Tools include dashboards, budgets, milestones, and other things. We'll polish these tools up this week as we anticipate getting them in the dirt. As Jim Collins states in his book, Good to Great, the key method of building strategy and thus fighting entropy is persistent pushing in a consistent direction over a long period of time. As usual, Collins' statements packs a lot of information in a concise manner. The sentence above, when pulled apart, really does define the essence of strategy. Persistent pushing means that this is not a hobby for the successful strategist. Rather, it's almost an addiction. It's not pushing alone that creates strategy, however. Pushing in a consistent direction helps you avoid random acts of improvement and eventually entropy. This consistent direction is established at a macro level via your hedgehog concept and your core principles, your mission, vision, and values, and at a more micro level by establishing a set of often difficult but achievable objectives that can be measured. Collins uses the image of a flywheel to illustrate this concept. Over time, this flywheel methodology results in a breakthrough. How many times, for instance, have you seen an artist you've been a fan of for years become an overnight sensation? This is the flywheel effect at work. Artists who have real talent and persistently push in a consistent direction over a long period of time often have breakthrough moments that made it look like an overnight success story, to all but those who are in the know, the early adapters. The alternative to this approach is a series of random acts of improvement, described by Collins as the doom loop. This is an attempt at skipping building and going right to breakthrough. Of course, this doesn't work, and then the non-strategic artist looks for the next build-up skipping sure thing and lurches back and forth with no consistent direction. Ultimately, entropy sets in, the band breaks up, and everyone points fingers at each other and with raised voices accuses each other of causing the problems. To avoid this terrible situation, it's essential to focus on the alignment of goals and make continual progress towards accomplishing them. In order to make and measure this progress, you must have the right set of tools. The analogy of a dashboard is instructive because so many car dashboards now contain a wealth of information. Beyond the crucially important gauges that measure your speed, gas, engine temperature, and distance, many of today's cars have dashboards that feature GPS systems and other displays that inform you of virtually any problem that might arise with your car. This is the type of detailed system that you must create for your strategic dashboard. This week we'll discuss just how to use this dashboard to measure your strategic progress, both from a short-term and long-term perspective. Additionally, interspersed throughout the lesson is a discussion on the relationships between cash flow and strategy. Finally, we'll discuss some specific milestones that will help you set goals as you put your strategy together for the artist you work with. While it seems somewhat obvious that the definition of strategy is pushing in a consistent direction over time, the fact that so few people manage to do this shows that it's far from easy. There are two problems that cause people to fail. The first is not setting realistic goals that align with their hedgehog concept and core principles. The second is not having a tool to measure whether or not you are in fact progressing. There are various tools that you can use to create your dashboard. I will talk about the tools I use, but please feel free to find ones that work best for you. It is not possible to talk too much about strategic plans, and you certainly can never be too concerned with measuring and tracking your performance in relation to these plans. If you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. While we'll discuss specific strategic plans in more depth in a later lesson, it's important to address them here in the context of the dashboard. Whether your strategic plan is one dealing with a specific gig that is coming up, or for something larger, like the release of a new record, you must constantly be referring to these plans. These plans are your maps, and they relate intimately to your cash flow and your calendars. For example, if you've devised a strategic plan to promote an upcoming gig, it will obviously have a set of series dates attached to it. The most obvious date would be the actual date of the performance, but any artist who only focuses on the performance date itself will not succeed. Instead, as soon as the date is booked, an artist must create a sequence of dates that have action items attached to them. The reason that many gigs don't succeed is that artists don't take the steps to properly set up the gig, and even fewer maximize the gig by performing additional post-gig activity as above. You can see the strategic plan dovetails with your calendar, but it also relates to cash flow. You might have an issue, for instance, if you discover that you're out of CDs and you don't have the cash flow available to have more made. Fortunately, because you've given yourself ample time, you'll be able to figure out a way to generate some income and get the CDs made. This is where managing cash flow becomes an art. If you had waited until the day prior to the gig to check on your CD stock and discovered you had neither the needed CDs nor the cash flow to make new ones, you would have blown a tremendous revenue-generating opportunity. Similarly, the day after the gig, your cash flow changes as you deposit the revenue you made from the gig payment and merch sales at the gig. While strategic plans relating to a gig are very detailed, much like the ultra high zoom mode on your GPS, where you can see all of the street names, you also need the high altitude 35,000 foot view of your progress. From there, you don't have the detail, but you have a better perspective of your overall progress from one state to another on the way across the country. Being a successful artist involves a constant process of using your GPS to view at 35,000 feet to make sure you're on the right broad route, and then zooming in to street level to make sure you're getting the specifics right. Along the way, you have to be sure not only that you're on the right broad and detailed route, but you also need to make sure that the car won't break down before you get there. Every 3,000 miles or so, you need to change the oil, and every 60,000 miles, you need a tune-up. Oil changes are quarterly strategic reviews. These oil changes should be marked on the calendar to occur every few months. At these times, you should analyze the past 3 months' progress with respect to CD downloads sold, website traffic, gig turnout, progress on songwriting, cash flow. Finally, you should review the plan for what the next 3 months look like. While you change your oil every 3 months, you only get a tune-up every year. You should hold a detailed formal band meeting where you go over everything: the progress, the concerns, the goals, the accomplishments, the failures, the cash, etc. There should be an agenda for these meetings created by you. You should bring your calendar, financial statements, and strategic plans to this meeting and lay them out for yourself and the others in the band. Both the oil change meetings and the tune-up meetings should be prominently displayed on the dashboard. You need to know far in advance when they're coming. They provide very good incentive to make sure your day-to-day efforts are adding up to significant things you can report on at these meetings. Just as you don't want to see the check engine light on your car flash red, you don't want to have the equivalent of this on your dashboard. The oil change and tune-up meetings will obviate a lot of potential problems as they serve as preventative maintenance. As with a car, even the best preventative maintenance can't reduce all problems. However, if you service it soon after the check engine light comes on, as opposed to driving around with a malfunctioning engine, you can often solve the problems without too much damage being done. The warning lights you should look for relate back to the other items in your dashboard. For instance, if your cash flow goes to negative, that's a significant warning sign that you must adjust your strategy. Similarly, if you have gaps in your calendar, this is a warning sign. Finally, if your strategic plans are not being followed, this should generate a warning light as well. There are more subtle warning signs to be aware of, and these relate to the warning lights that are found on newer and more expensive cars. Rather than there just being a generic check engine light, newer cars have very specific warnings. The air in your right rear tire is low, for example. Next, I want to talk about the different types of situations you may find yourself in as an artist and give you some specific strategy about how to maximize your situation. While it's impossible to lump artists into neat categories, there are certain patterns that artists fall into. I refer to these patterns as archetypes. As I go through these archetypes, try to determine which you most closely resemble. Hopefully, some of these ideas will lead to strategic initiatives. These are jumping off points and necessarily are fairly overgeneralized. However, they do provide a base. Archetype 1, passion, talent, and not much else. This is by far the most common artist archetype, and likely most of you will fall into this category. The most important strategy for this type of artist is to start maximizing the gigs. This may require that you create a demo package complete with a demo CD, a bio, and all the other elements so that you begin getting it out to clubs and booking gigs. If, however, you're not even ready to play gigs because the performance isn't up to par, you will need to work on tightening the live show. It may be that you determine that the best gigs at this point are private function amongst friends. Do whatever it takes to gradually get in front of people so you can begin developing a stage presence, but do not play in front of a crowd before you're ready. Focus on low-key, non-professional gigs such as playing at a house party or even an open mic. Do this as long as it takes to begin getting some positive feedback and building a little cadre of fans. From there you can move to professional gigs, where you begin playing at clubs and getting paid for it. As you saw in a previous lesson, playing a club gig sets off a chain reaction of any number of strategic activities that you must engage in to maximize the gig. Archetype 2, playing gigs but not gaining any real traction. The next level up are artists who have been playing locally, perhaps having some nights where the club is full and other nights where it's nearly empty. These artists are classic examples of those who are engaging in random acts of improvement. As an artist, at this point, your job is to bring focus and strategy to your activities. You may need to rein in the performance schedule. Often, artists who take any gig they can get will fatigue a local audience. A band's friends can only be counted on to come out to support you for so long. You also need to make certain that the gigs are being viewed in a strategic manner. Are you alerting your fans to local radio? Are you alerting fans to retail, press, radio about gigs? Do you have the tools, a demo and press package, to do so? Are you selling CDs and merch at the gigs? Do you have a mailing list, a website, a MySpace page? Archetype 3, big fish in a small pond. At the next level are artists who have developed a significant local following in their hometown. Whenever they play live, for example, the shows sell out, and they get good press and some local radio play. They even have CDs in the local store. Often this artist has become a success on a larger level in the past, like being signed to a label or part of a group that was, but is now trying to do it on their own. Other times, the artist has managed to do the strategic planning and execution to get them to this big fish in a small pond stage, but for whatever reason, can't get beyond it. Again, your first challenge is to assess values. If the reason you haven't expanded your reach beyond your hometown is because one of the band members has a day job or a family that doesn't allow him to tour, that's a very important detail. If, however, there's nothing keeping the band from expanding their base, including your own lack of desire, you have a real opportunity to improve via strategy. An artist at this level should be generating some decent cash flow and will likely have some infrastructure in place, CDs, mailing list, website, etc. It's your job as an artist at this point to refine the organization. You must make sure that everything that is in place is strategically aligned and look for ways to create efficiencies. Does the website need updating? Are you connecting via blogs, podcasts, etc. with your audience as effectively and frequently as possible? Your next step is to get the band on the road. Do not spend all your time looking for a booking agent. Instead, look for other artists in nearby cities and towns who are stylistically similar to what you do and find ways to swap opening slots with them so that you open in their strong hometown market and vice versa. In this manner, both artists benefit and develop new strong markets of their own. Do this in several markets and pretty soon you've got a good little touring circuit. At this point, you have a decent enterprise cooking along and you can focus on selling more records and expanding your possibilities. This is also the time when labels, booking agents, managers, etc. come calling. Please think long and hard before you do deals with these people. Make sure that they value the potential you bring more than you can do on your own, and that you're not giving too much up to get it. More and more, it's very viable for an artist to have a far more lucrative, satisfying enterprise on his or her own than to trade away equity and control for assistance from people who really aren't bringing much to the party. That said, often labels can really accelerate your artist's career. When it comes to distribution and radio play, for instance, just weigh the options. Once you've established a good touring circuit, you need to look for other revenue streams. These would include, but not be limited to, revenue from publishing, getting your music used in syncs and broadcast on radio, as well as from mechanicals, should you opt for a label deal, and if some artist covers your songs. Merchandise sales, record sales, either gigs or retailers, and also using your own distribution network. International revenue, which would arise from making deals to have your sound recordings released in foreign territories. These are all examples of different types of revenue streams that you as an artist need to be thinking about. Basically, the jump from a big fish in a small pond to a national and even international artist comes down to strategy. As stated, the above list is necessarily a generalization. These archetypes are by no means comprehensive, but most artists will fall on or near one of these categories. Your job as an artist is to assess where you are and determine how you can take yourself to the next level. Having a dashboard is essential to breakthrough. It enables you to quickly integrate the key components of your strategy, cash flow, calendars, and strategic plans, and it displays warning signs to alert you to diversions from your progress. Finally, the dashboard allows you to assess your current situation and determine strategic plans to accelerate your growth. While these skills develop over time, you'll maximize your success by beginning with an understanding of both the tools and variables.